Welcome to the Whisk Mama Bear Podcast, episode 34. I'm your host, Sarah Yacoub. Today's topic, the space between words and actions. Good morning. Tonight is New Year's Eve, and with the closing of 2020, I don't know about you, but boy, does that feel good. It's a nice contrast to what's happening in Madison, which doesn't feel good at all. While it would be easier to not talk about it, focus on that which is pleasant, and go along our merry way, that's effectively the enabler's roadmap to life, and those whom we'd be enabling are empowered to continue very real harm. Wisconsin Assembly Speaker Robin Vos is requiring the 99 Assembly members to attend next week's session in person. There will be no remote options for attendance, and no, they will not be enforcing any mask mandate. As reported by Up North News, Vos's announcement came on the same day that the Wisconsin Department of Health Services reported a single-day record for COVID deaths in Wisconsin. 120 people died in one day. To date, we've lost 4,545 Wisconsinites to COVID-19. At best, the space between words and actions is synergistic, consistent, honest. A common theme with Wisconsin Republican politicians is the disconnect between words and actions. In short, hypocrisy. Even though more communities than not in Wisconsin self-identify as largely Christian, even though the Bible has plenty to say about hypocrisy, even though people and entities have been trying in apparent vain to speak to this hypocrisy, it never seems to matter. What makes the hypocrisy of the Wisconsin GOP particularly offensive? It's the substance. We're not talking about someone who says that people should all be vegetarian and then who goes out and eats meat. We're talking about claims of protecting the most vulnerable and then shamelessly bullying their own member in the assembly who is disabled and unlawfully denying him reasonable accommodations that are required by law. It is saying that they value life and then force a mass gathering during a pandemic, refuse to take federal relief that expands access to health care to tens of thousands of Wisconsinites, and refuse to convene to disperse over $3 million in relief for those who are homeless in the middle of a Wisconsin winter. The Wisconsin GOP claims to stand for law and order and to be against voter and election fraud, only to actively insulate and enable the voter and election fraud of their own member. Forcing everyone into in-person session next week is not only stupid, but unnecessary and cruel. For members like Representative Jimmy Anderson, this arbitrary power play callously gambles with his life. Representative Anderson is paralyzed from the waist down after being hit by an intoxicated driver on his 24th birthday. That collision took the lives of his entire family and left him reduced usage of his lungs. A virus like COVID-19 would predictably end Representative Anderson's life. Speaker Vos knows this. He just doesn't care. Worse, Republican members of the Assembly lack the courage of conviction to stand with Representative Anderson and say this is wrong, just as they were too cowardly to support him in his request for very basic accommodations as not only required by law, but provisions already in place in the state Senate. Once again, they leave him hanging here. Do Rob Staffschold or Shannon Zimmerman come back to the district advertising that they are the campus bullies in Madison? Of course not. In fact, based on how they pretend to care about people with disabilities locally, unless we're really paying attention, we'd never know of their cruelty when they think their district isn't looking. After all, they all enjoy re-election after some pretty ugly behavior in the past. Why put in the work to be better now if they can keep getting away with more of the same? I would like to think that this is not a partisan issue, that treating others with basic decency, following the law, and acting responsibly is something we can all agree are values we want to see in leadership. The sad reality, however, is that we as voters do not hold politicians accountable for their morally bankrupt behavior. Why not? They are a reflection on us. They serve as our representative. When Shannon Zimmerman and Rob Staffschold are acting like campus bullies in Madison, too cool to actually do right by the most vulnerable among them, they represent and reflect upon us. What a sad reflection on we the people. Robin Vos is someone who has been married and divorced numerous times. As I understand it, his previous wives are prohibited from speaking to who he is behind closed doors. As an attorney who goes toe-to-toe with people who terrorize their families for a living, I see a lot of red flags, and nothing about who he is when he thinks the world is not watching would surprise me. Publicly, Voss continues to be a never-ending source of dick moves as the Speaker of the Assembly. Those who know, and the rest continue to vote for his rubber stamps. So, while he is only elected by roughly 16,000 people in the state, he operates as though entitled to and wielding the power of, say, the governor, or someone elected statewide. He is rumored to be the reason Republican politicians sound like Democrats come election season, exploiting the image of a quality family person who values public schools and healthcare is a strategy that continues to work for them. Their record tells a very different story, but who's counting? On a personal level, it baffles me that we as a community are so willing to enable and empower someone so ugly in their behavior and use of power. I have to believe it's that most people are busy living their lives, not bathing in Wisconsin politics at any given moment, and just don't know. One of the challenges of running against one of Robin Voss's rubber stamps is the balance between the leadership and public positions that I would bring to the state assembly and having to raise awareness about what Robin Voss's rubber stamp has been doing with his time in the state assembly. Voss isn't stupid. He doesn't leave his rubber stamps hanging to try to explain their bad deeds. He equips them with talking points, that which are designed to sound good and intended for a voter base that they count on to not ask questions, not dig further, and who want to like the person for whom they voted. The sad reality is that it has worked for so long. Why would they ever change it? It was morally bankrupt before. The fact that it continues to be morally bankrupt is not surprisingly not enough to inspire them to be better. Circling back to next week's session, I would like to think that given the failure to make reasonable accommodations is blatantly unlawful, that Speaker Voss will eventually allow for remote appearances. His supporters, or those who do mental gymnastics to insulate Republican politicians in Wisconsin, will say, well, who cares? At the end of the day, the issue was resolved. Why are we still talking about it? The problem is that the issue, which as of now has not been resolved, will only get the attention and response it deserves once people pour a considerable amount of time and energy to make a bad situation right. How exhausting that those entrusted to do the right thing, to represent us in our place and absence, will only knock it off and be honorable when forced to as a function of enough people learning of their morally bankrupt behavior and judgment. That is wrong. We as members of the community shouldn't have to actively police our representatives when it comes to basics like being honorable and accommodating persons with disabilities. We pay our representatives to represent our interests and our community. While it makes sense that we as voters should pay attention to the actions of our representatives from a policy standpoint, at this level of callousness and inability to choose even the most basic examples of right in the face of wrong leaves we the people in the exhausting and impossible position of either watching everything they do, which would be akin to a full-time job, or be none the wiser of behavior that not only reflects badly on us, but on our community as a whole, as it continues to cause very real harm. It is not too much to ask for representatives who are of enough moral fiber to trust that they will treat others with civility in their capacity of representing us. My husband and I watched The Way I See It last night. It's the story of Pete Salza, White House photographer for Reagan and Obama. His behind-the-scenes perspectives and experiences are fascinating. Perhaps what stood out the most was the importance of leaders who are not only genuinely empathetic, but those who, at their heart, are or strive to be good people. And that's not something you can fake. It wasn't about partisan politics, just like everything we discussed today isn't a function of partisanship, but rather about what it means to have leaders who bring honor to the office that they hold, honor to the people they represent, honor to our great nation. I hope everyone has a safe and memorable New Year's Eve. As you can probably tell from my voice, I'm a bit under the weather and hope it passes soon. To everyone listening, Happy New Year. Episode 35 tomorrow. See you there.